Transmitting directly into your reality from some sort of weird, wacky afterlife nothing where up is down, black is white, and dogs are just as adorable as always because they're dogs, this is Vaguely Scientific. I am trying once again to contact someone from the familiar plane of reality. I am Derek, and while I do that, here's Jim to entertain you.
Waka waka.
Yeah. Oh, I seem to have broken through just enough to make contact with someone. Adam, can you hear me?
What is this ectoplasm?
Oh, sorry.
It's just, what a way to contact someone.
It's just, we're still refining the process.
I told you to keep the cork on that.
Well, this is the show where listeners send in questions to hear our vaguely scientific answers. But before we answer those questions, we always make time for the fun science fact of the day. Jim?
Okay. The orthograph map projection is considered the most accurate map projection for representing the true size of land masses. However, it does wildly distort latitude and longitude lines, oceans, and it looks wild. It is out of control.
I did look this up to see where like the poles and stuff are. I love this idea that we just need the world to be a rectangle.
Yeah.
To fit it on a map.
Well, how are you going to tack it to the wall if it's not a rectangle?
You always have to make compromises. That's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Is this the one that looks like an orange peel?
No, it's like, it is a rectangle, but it distorts the latitude and longitude lines so that the continents are all roughly this correct size and shape, but they're like splayed out on the map in an incredibly weird way. Like Antarctica is just like smack in the bottom right corner, just like the whole of Antarctica.
So basically, they warp big stretches of the ocean instead of land masses.
Mm-hmm.
I see. The orthograph, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, that definitely does not look like anything I've ever seen in an elementary school classroom.
Yeah. I feel like it borders on not being particularly useful after a certain point.
That sums up a lot of cartography, unfortunately.
Yeah. This all came about because we were talking about peeling the Earth apart and turning it into
I see.
A flat Earth, and I'm like, well, what maps would work the best for that? And I guess this one is like the best as far as the land masses go, but the rest of the planet, forget it. Just yeah.
Yeah, we don't need the ocean. We don't need to know where stuff is in the oceans.
Yeah, I mean, if you flatten the Earth, it doesn't matter where the oceans are anyway.
All right, well, let's stop putting our map makers down and move on to question 1 this week, which comes to us from Megan. Are wings on humans, like fairies, possible? Would it be more possible in miniature form like Tinkerbell? Or does it not matter if the wing and body sizes are proportionally the same?
I read on the internet, and I think this is, I want to start with this just because I thought it was interesting. And also, I might be wrong because I read it on the internet. So I think what I saw was that Tinkerbell can't fly unless she has the fairy dust. And if she doesn't have the fairy dust, then the wings are irrelevant and she can't fly.
That is a matter of some debate. I know we talked about it a little bit before. Do the fairies need the fairy dust themselves?
Yeah, I always assumed that they were somehow producing it. Like, I don't know, like it's fairy sweat more than it's dust. But, or fairy dandruff, maybe? I don't know.
Fairy dandruff. The first note I wanted to point out, this is a completely unhelpful thing to say, but the question says, are wings on humans possible? It doesn't ask, are they functional? So I want to say, like, technically wings on humans are possible. You could graft some wings to a person.
Yeah.
It's true.
There was a really cool, I don't know if she still does this, but there was a wrestler named Athena who is currently, as of the time of recording, I believe, the Ring of Honor World Champion. And she had like a backpack that had these mechanical wings, and they wouldn't stretch out too far, maybe like 4 feet on either side, but like they were articulated. So like she would stretch out her arms and the wings would open up, and it looked really cool. So yeah, I mean, she's got wings. They're on a backpack, but she's got them.
Yeah, like if we're talking Dr. Octopus style, cybernetic appendages, I guess. All right, Adam, let's use actual Spider-Man villains with wings. Vulture style cybernetic appendages. Okay. Then sure, yeah, we could do that. I do think it's fascinating. They're back in like 2001 to 2005. There was a plastic surgeon who was making a lot of headlines about this kind of thing.
Oh.
Dr. Joe Rosen. And he was saying in 2005 or so, he was saying that within 5 years, we will have the ability to grow wings on people. To like, as a plastic surgeon, go in, modify some ribs, stretch some skin, and basically his theory was if you create the appendage, your brain's neural network will understand the appendage, and then you'll have wings. He never said that you could fly with them, but he said you could make them.
Well, he's a plastic surgeon, so probably just cosmetic.
Right. But like his whole thing, he is still around. He has stopped making claims about giving people wings so much, but he's still very much in the realm of why are we so insistent on like returning people to the norm or bringing people to these standards of beauty? There's so much more that we could do.
I like that starts as sort of like a noble, like altruistic idea, and then very quickly hard left turn into mad science.
Right.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about, this is kind of on that line, I guess, if it's sort of like the skin turning into wings or something. I looked at the difference between, because humans are not insectoid, so even if they were shrunken down, I looked at something that would be closer to the mammalian structure. So I looked at bat wings.
Yep.
I learned a couple things, and these would all add complications, but I learned that, well, I'm sure a lot of people are aware that birds' bones are hollow. Bat bones are not hollow, but they are very thin and long, which helps them like reduce weight. I also learned that their leg bones don't really work very well under compression, which is why they don't like stand. And it's actually harder for them to take off from the ground, which is another reason that hanging works for them, because they can just kind of let go and then they are airborne.
Yeah.
So if we were to shrink humans down, I think bat wings would be more reasonable to actually work, because human bones, even if we were smaller, they're still not going to be hollow. They're still not going to be light enough.
The other thing with bats is if you look at the size of a bat's like torso and then look at the wingspan of the bat, it is enormous.
Yeah, their fingers are so long.
Yeah.
And imagining what would have to happen to our arms and fingers in order to give us a wingspan of, multiple meters. I saw several different things online that went anywhere from 4-meter wingspan to requiring like a 12-meter wingspan. All of that is impractical.
Yeah. A human is like 1.5 meters on average. So
I thought about that when I was just thinking about wings in general. I started with like the feathery, like angel wing kind of picture, and in order for them to generate enough lift to lift our bodies as is, they would have to be enormous, and then we wouldn't be able to lift the wings.
Right.
Yeah. There would be substantially more wing than human.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I was reading about that I thought was really interesting is that not only are we too heavy, like our skeletons and everything, but also the way that a bird is built, a huge percentage of their muscles is actually like in the like front chest area. That's why, a chicken breast has all the good meat. So,
right.
But like all their muscles are in the front of their body so that they can move those wings the way that they need to in order to make it fly. So like, you could graft a bunch of wings onto yourself, but you would also have to fundamentally redesign your musculature to actually be able to flap them and take off.
Our pectoral muscles would not handle that well.
No.
So what you're telling me is the final form of Sephiroth in FF7 wouldn't work.
No.
Especially given that there's only one wing there, but yes.
Yeah. Good point, yeah. Speaking of professional wrestling.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I get that reference, and I'm disappointed.
Good. I'm a little surprised you do, but I'm glad you do.
It was, Kenny Omega, right?
Yeah.
See,
well done.
I listen to you sometimes.
I don't recommend it.
I also looked up, because the question specifically mentions Tinkerbell.
Yep.
And Tinkerbell, the fairy design of Tinkerbell is the wings are bug-like.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked up that insect wings are made of chitin or cuticle, which is what their exoskeleton is also made of. But when it is dense and thick, chitin is actually very heavy, which is why insect wings are actually very thin. So I looked up the largest insect wing that I could find was the Atlas moth, which has a wingspan of about 10 inches. And that, if you've ever handled a moth, you will know that their wings are very, very fragile. And that's because they're made of this chitin material, then they have to be so thin in order to be able to lift them and flap them that they're not durable like at all.
Huh.
Yeah, insect wings are the structure of them is actually really, really strong for their purpose. But if they get any stress other than that of flight, they're not great for that. And yeah, like moth wings, you touch them and they will just rip apart very quickly.
Yeah.
But the rigors of flight, not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
I also spent a little bit of time looking at insect wings because, again, Tinkerbell and a lot of representation of fairies have that kind of dragonfly kind of wing look. And I feel like the last time I was on the show, I talked a lot about how insect joints move, but wings are wild. I love this. So most insects use indirect muscle movement to move their wings. So birds use direct muscle movement. Those muscles attached to that keel bone directly attach into the wings, and those muscles move the wings directly. Most insects, dragonflies are the only insects that have direct muscle movement like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Every other insect has indirect muscle movement, which basically means they have muscles that run crosswise and laterally through their thorax, and then those muscles expand and contract the exoskeleton, the thorax itself. So think if you had your rib cage outside of your body, and then your pectoral muscles manipulated your rib cage, and that's how your arms moved. Was by your rib cage lifting up and down.
Jeez.
It's crazy.
I think it's interesting because, so birds flapping their wings would be kind of similar to you flapping your arms.
Yeah.
But insects would kind of be like if you were holding some popsicle sticks next to your chest and just like flicking your thumb and finger up and down.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's wild that they get, that they can fly with if that's how they control their wings.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because also, like, if you watch butterflies, for instance, they are always bobbing up and down because their wings just open and close like doors, basically. So
Yeah.
It's really a very different kind of flight, even though it achieves the same end.
I do want the listeners to know that while I was describing that example, I was miming it.
That's good. It's only appropriate.
Yeah. It's important to do all the miming work behind the scenes.
Yes.
Listeners, that's why you got to write to your congressman and tell them we need a live show.
I'm not. You know what? Sure. Adam, you were going to say something.
Anyway, one of the things that I think is very cool about how insects actually fly is where birds generate a lot of lift with the surface of the wing itself. Insects, most of their lift is actually generated because the movement of the wings creates little vortexes of air beneath the wing. So rather than what we think of as aerodynamics, like how does air flow over a bird's wing or over an airplane's wing, they're actually working more like helicopters.
Yeah.
Which is pretty sweet.
Interesting.
And I think that, like, Tinkerbell as a helicopter pilot would be would be some good
That'd be
stuff.
great.
That's what
I'm here for it.
But you said something a second ago. We were talking about moth wings, and that takes me back to what we said earlier. Maybe fairy dust is actually the little scales of color on a moth or butterfly's wings, that as Tinkerbell is flying, she's just shedding all of those little scales of color.
I thought about that because like moth wings are like powdery.
Yeah.
I want to give a shout out to a YouTube channel that I enjoy watching, and every time I show it to people, they think it's weird. But it's called Ant Lab.
Yes.
There's this guy who he's an entomologist who has been filming a lot of different insects taking off and flying in slow motion, and I just love watching it. So it's great. There's another YouTube channel that doesn't need us to plug them, but I'm doing it anyway.
It's a good channel.
I think it's great to watch things like that in slow motion because it happens so quickly.
Yeah.
It's amazing to see how many bugs take off immediately and are just like upside down and plummeting headfirst into the ground.
Yeah.
They don't actually know how to fly.
Yep. They just go for it.
Continuing with insect wings for can fairies actually exist? The other thing that I think is really important about why the answer to the question is no, is that we have fossil record of dragonflies from so long ago that they've always looked just like this.
Yeah.
Any other creatures with wings, whether we're talking about modern dinosaurs or bats, those are appendages that started off with another purpose and then eventually became wings.
That's cool.
And that's one of the reasons that, like, right now, humans, obviously, normal human morphology does not have more than 4 major appendages. We are not hexapods the way insects are.
Not with that attitude.
And we are unlikely to naturally evolve towards hexapedalism.
Not with that attitude.
You gotta let them finish, Jim.
Because we won't, there's no purpose for us to suddenly have an additional set of limbs.
Yeah.
Now that again does not discount things like cybernetic limbs or a crazy plastic surgeon coming in and giving you wings.
Now we need wings. We gotta have wings.
But we are very unlikely to ever actually evolve them.
Mm-hmm.
With that in mind, I did start looking at other things that we might evolve into that would give us wings. First off, it would actually be a little bit of a backward step for us because it's going into the reptile world, but flying dragon lizards, which are ridiculously cool.
Yeah?
They have no sternum because their ribs are free-floating and expansive.
Oh, those things.
Yeah, those things.
I know what you're talking
Google
about
here.
now. Oh, those things are disgusting.
They're so cool. How can you say they're disgusting? They're amazing.
Because their ribs are their wings.
Their ribs are their wings.
Yeah, I like those things.
Also, we do have, other than bats, we have mammals that do not truly fly, but glide. And those are the, like sugar gliders, flying squirrels, things like that, that have, this is my new vocabulary word for this episode, patagia, which is the flap of skin that runs from, and yes, for those of you who want to know, like Derek, I am, in fact, spreading my arms wide to show the flaps of skin that I do not have running between.
Right to your congressman, people.
I learned that word from Vampire the Requiem.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we would have to stop wearing clothes. Because clothing will definitely prevent the use of patagia.
Yeah.
So, if you want to evolve wings, then nudity becomes necessary.
If you want to evolve wings.
That would be fun to see, people with actual, we already have the flying squirrel suits for jumping out of airplanes.
That was on my list. That was where I was going to go next.
Yeah.
That, we do have that. It can carry human beings. They can't fly, but they can glide.
I'm so curious. I watch videos of those from time to time, and the videos always end before they land, and I'm like,
Parachutes.
how do you land? Okay, but they're
you
so
wear a
close to the
parachute.
ground a lot of time. Does
Yeah.
that seems dangerous?
I had that question for the longest time, so I actually had to look it up to verify. You also wear a parachute.
I'm going to have to try to search videos for that specifically, because I can't even imagine, seems like a bad plan.
I mean, it's not a thing you can practice. That's what I'm turned off by.
Oh yeah, good point.
Well, that's why they do tandem jumps.
I want to touch on just very briefly something that we kind of skipped over, and that is, would humans have to be scaled down? And I think we all just kind of made that leap, assuming, yes, they would have to be scaled down for this to even remotely have a chance of working. Because, human-sized insect wings just wouldn't work.
Yeah, I think that if you want the wings to be functional, I don't think it matters.
Right.
I think the answer is no at whatever scale, without massive physiological changes to the human body.
Yeah, you'd have to be bugs.
Yeah.
You'd have to turn into a bug.
I have to say, of all the wings that I know of, I think dragonfly wings are my favorite. They just look cool. It's fun to watch dragonflies hover.
Yeah.
The biggest problem here is then you'll run into a bunch of English literature majors and they'll just start making references to Kafka all the time, and who wants that?
Fair.
But then you can just think about the fact that dragonflies have been around since before the dinosaurs.
Yeah.
They have not changed other than in size. And again, they're the only insects that have direct muscle movement to their wings, so they can control those wings as well as we can control our fingers, which is pretty cool.
They are the ultimate predator.
They are the ultimate predator. They have something like a 90 or 95% success rate on whatever they decide to go hunt. Which is why we are glad the only changes they've made since prior to dinosaurs is getting smaller.
Yeah. Well, we can thank the atmosphere for that.
Yeah. I don't know that I'd want to live in a world with a 40% oxygen atmosphere. Seems like it might be a bit of a headache from time to time.
Good news, Jim. I don't think you would for long.
I mean, Things survived. There was just a lot more forest fires.
Much like humans with functional fairy wings, it would require massive physiological changes. I want to say one more thing before we move on from this, because I am a big old nerd and it is necessary that I mention as we are talking. We talked about flying squirrels and the possibility of humans growing patagia, which means I need to give a shout out to the most ridiculous race in D&D, the Hadazee.
I don't know this one.
They're from the Starjammer setting, so they fly around in the astral sea on ships that go between the galaxies. And they are essentially, think of a flying squirrel. Now think of an orangutan. Now think of a flying squirrel orangutan. And then make it a really happy pirate.
Huh.
Well, that saved it for me.
And then you have a Hadazee. So anyway, needed to mention them because they're important.
So, sorry to dash all of your dreams, listeners, about having fairy wings, but we have to, deal in science here on Vaguely Scientific. That's what we do. But we do have a second question this week. So, without further ado, question 2 this week is, why are lawns a thing, and do they do any good for anyone?
I was trying to look into a little bit of why they are a thing.
Oh, okay.
And my understanding is that they started out basically as like a status symbol. It's like, ooh, look, this is a patch of land that A, you don't need to grow any food on, and B, you have enough leisure time that you get to maintain it.
Ah, interesting. So, yes, sort of. But the reason they started as a status symbol is that they were inspired originally by the fact that they would surround castles with large clear areas. And these would make it so that, scouts and guards could see any invaders that might be coming to attack the castle.
Yeah, so there's a lot of theory that it actually goes as far back as, savanna in Africa and people liking that wide open space to be able to see predators. Yeah. And that's kind of an ingrained thing in us. And then when we started building things that we would fortify, we wanted to keep it clear. I looked around and I found a lot of things that I think there's some fascinating information here, but it also frustrates me with the internet because it's the internet and it's therefore stupid. Just the number of lawn care websites that I found that include a what's the history of lawn care section on the website, which I'm like, dude, I am trying to hire you to come mow my lawn. I don't need you to take me back to the African savannah, but okay, you do you. But one cool thing that I was finding consistently is that the first reference that we have to cultivated lawn care, that it's not just, okay, we're going to clear this space so that we can see across it, but we're going to actually deliberately grow a short grassed space is actually back in Japan. And there's a written record from 1159 in Japan about making a lawn. And then most of these websites actually use the same language that they've all copy-pasted from each other. And they said, so this written thing that we have from Japan was in 1159, and then nothing else in the written record until the 12th century.
Right.
Huh.
And I'm just, guys, 1159 is the 12th century. But fine. But yes, so from there, absolutely, it comes into castles and fortifications. And then one of my favorite architectural idiocies is the garden folly, which I think is directly related to places of short grass around castles, because a garden folly is basically a rich dude saying, I've got this plot of land over here, let's put a fake castle in the middle of it, and then keep all of the grass around it very short so it looks like a castle.
So it looks like a castle. I was finding it became popular in Versailles.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the weird part about it, is because I looked into, for years now, I've been looking into alternate ground covers for my yard because I just hate mowing the lawn. I looked at moss and clover. Those are my two favorites. There's a myth that moss attracts fleas and ticks and mosquitoes, and that's not true. They need taller plants to thrive. And clover smells nice and looks pretty and attracts bees, which I say is a positive.
Yep.
So I like both of those things, but I was reading that in like Middle England, they would make their lawns out of lower maintenance plants, things like thyme. And it wasn't until it became popular in France to use grass that was higher maintenance, but they would have it fed on by animals to keep, and they would graze.
Yep.
And the reason I mentioned Versailles in particular is because Versailles became popular because it was very aristocratic. They could hire laborers to keep the grass cut. So they became famous for having a well-cut lawn devoid a well-manicured lawn devoid of animal waste. And because everybody has always wanted to emulate the rich, because everybody has always wanted to be rich throughout history, that became the status symbol of let's have a well-manicured lawn with no animal waste in it.
And that's actually something that Jefferson went and saw Versailles and saw the green carpet at Versailles. And so when Jefferson came back and built Monticello, that was one of the big things that he wanted to incorporate into it. Okay. That's part of what brought it here to America. Washington did something similar at Mount Vernon. So it's very much, our founding fathers went over to France and saw what they were doing. And much like, fancy dresses coming back across the ocean, we also brought grass. And so Kentucky bluegrass is one of the really important grasses for lawns. It's actually originally from the Middle East.
Okay.
But it was brought over here in that kind of post-Revolutionary War period. And it was pretty well only wealthy Americans who had this stuff until the mid-19th century. And then you start getting more and more public parks. And so Olmsted, developing all of his giant parks right up against residential areas, and then a lot of people started saying, well, that park is really great, let's continue that communal space. And the houses started to get those lawns to emulate all of that. And then especially after World War II, we have tract housing, which is inexpensive housing for essentially the rising middle class. And they wanted little postage stamp lawns in order to look like they were wealthy enough to have a lawn.
Yeah.
Also, with that time period, you see the development of the American highway system and much more travel. And now there are motorists passing by my house. I want to make sure that I look like a fine, upstanding citizen, so I'll have a well-manicured lawn, too.
A thing that I also read, it's in that same time period. So yeah, people want to look like they have what the aristocracy has. We're also talking about the Industrial Revolution happening, and with the development of lawnmowers, the ability to have that became cheaper and cheaper. But because this is the Industrial Revolution, the cities are becoming more industrial. So not only do we want to emulate the aristocracy, but also we want to get away from really dense city and have our own patch of green, basically.
Right. This is the rise of suburbia.
This is the rise of suburbia. So it's one of those things that kind of started. I understand why it started, but I don't think we need to keep doing it.
Well, anytime you can say, well, this phenomenon is associated with the rise of suburbia, then probably you don't need to follow it up with saying, and it's bad.
And it's bad. This little rant that I have here is less backed by actual research, but it's just something I want to say. Through history, it seems like these trends have this unfortunate thing happening where form takes precedence over function. And the examples I have of this are clothing. If you look at the locations of buttons and how intricate things are and the lack of pockets in some formal wear, wearing warm coats in hot weather because of style, I don't understand. Cars, earth tones in cars are very popular, and loud colors other than red tend to be looked at as gaudy, even though if all cars were loud colors, they would be way more visible. And this is just a theory of mine that I think is kind of funny. The pickup truck as a status symbol originally grew in popularity as like an anti-bourgeois kind of like, we're, grassroots blue collar. I drive a pickup truck. And I know a lot of people who drive pickup trucks that would never think of hauling anything in them. So they're like an anti-status symbol that has become a status symbol. That's my rant. I'm sorry.
It's funny, though.
Lawns fit very neatly into that same category.
Yeah.
So I hate lawns. I don't just hate mine. I don't just hate mowing the lawn. I hate the existence of them. I think they're stupid. I think they're awful. I understand. If my home were actually a castle, then I would understand the utility of fending off the invading hordes. But thankfully, that is not the world in which we live.
Yeah.
There are plenty of things wrong in this world, but thankfully, I'm not fending off a siege at the moment.
Yeah, you got to know when Burnham Wood's coming to Dunsinane.
You sure do.
You do. You have to be able to see that. But where do I start? All right. So concrete is useful, but ultimately I hate it, just like lawns. Think about a parking lot. What happens when it rains? The water falls on the parking lot, and then it runs off of the parking lot, and it goes away. It goes to whatever land is around the parking lot. The parking lot does not serve any environmental purpose. It doesn't absorb that rain. It doesn't allow things to grow that can use that rain.
Right.
Just it is essentially a black hole in the environment. And it creates all sorts of runoff, and we can talk about what the cars are dropping on it, and then the rain comes and washes all of that out and all of this. But then because that creates sheets of runoff, it allows more erosion of the land around the parking lot. It's basically not good for the environment. And the thing is, people look at a parking lot and they understand some of that. You look at a parking lot and you understand on some level that is a blight against nature. But people look at lawns and they don't recognize that lawns are exactly the same. Lawns are usually non-native grass, usually grass that does not have a root structure that allows for the absorption of water. They don't really do anything to prevent runoff. So, and environmentally, they also prevent things that are actually useful to the local area. They prevent the growth of local wildflowers. They prevent the growth of things that pollinators want, of things that, you don't get chipmunks in lawns. You get moles sometimes, but then we do everything we can to eradicate those. We throw pesticides down. I'm gonna stop, and I'm just gonna reiterate my thesis is that lawns are bad.
Lawns are bad. I agree with you.
I will say one thing. What I was reading, that grass is actually pretty good at preventing erosion, but you are right, though, it doesn't prevent runoff. Like, the soil will stay in place, but the water's not going to go into the soil. It's just going to roll down the street, basically.
Yeah,
so
that's a thing I've been reading about, because as I said, I have been researching alternate ground covers. I'm still just really harping on clover. It's my favorite.
Clover sounds great. Like, I have a giant hill as a front yard, and I don't like maintaining it because I have to roll a lawnmower up and down the hill. And I'm like, what can I put that A, I don't have to really cut, and B, will also make sure that the hill doesn't erode away into the street? And it sounds like clover might be the choice.
So what I learned is that the one good thing about like putting down grass seed, which I always think, like, you don't need, if there is grass there, you don't need to put grass seed down because it will spread. It's grass. That's what it does. But the one thing that it does do is it makes a solid root structure, which will, this is like, if you're very active in your yard, it makes it so the yard will be less muddy and slippery. But then I would say once you have that foundation, immediately put something else there.
Yeah.
And that's one of the big things. So I really love the idea of re-meadowing.
Mm-hmm.
I would very much like to see, like, I love clover. I think clover is great. Clover is also a pretty homogeneous plant. And what I would really love to see is a diversity of plant life, that you're going to have your grasses, which are going to create that kind of solid base. But then you also in there want wildflowers and other pollinating plants, things that will create different levels. Like if you go to a true meadow, you'll find that it's only 3 feet tall, but just like the Brazilian rainforest, there is a ground cover layer. There are several middle layers of different plants that serve different purposes at different levels. And then there's a canopy layer of the tallest plants. And they might not be branching plants the way trees in a jungle are, but they are serving a very similar purpose, just to much smaller creatures.
Mm-hmm.
They do the same thing of creating that good solid foundation that will prevent the dirt from eroding away. But because they are not a solid mat of just grass, they also allow for a lot more absorption and a lot more actual usefulness to the environment, as well as being solid enough for people to run around in and not tear it up.
Right. I really like the especially the for the pollinators, the native wildflower thing. I was looking at a lot of different pictures of those, and they just kind of look cool. I don't think I could maintain that. I do not think that I have the green thumb enough to have something that I can't just set and forget, but I love the native wildflower ones.
Here's the thing. Native wildflowers are more set and forget than any other lawn that you have. They take a little bit of time to set up because you have to get rid of all of the crap that's already on your lawn. But if you want a homogeneous Kentucky bluegrass lawn that is just Kentucky bluegrass, and you're going to maintain it at a certain height, and you're going to maintain it so that it's all this nice green color, that requires so many herbicides and pesticides and constant mowing and re-sowing of grass seeds to keep it, nice and even, and all of this stuff that it creates a weekly schedule of maintenance and an additional monthly schedule of maintenance and an additional seasonal schedule of maintenance. If you meadow a lawn, it's going to take you a few months to remove what you've already got there. And then a couple of months of like making sure that, okay, yeah, these seeds have taken, they're going. But if you have the right mix of seeds, then it'll grow. wildflowers don't actually need the same nutrients that grass does.
That's what I thought was so interesting, because before researching this question, I knew all the stuff we talked about the aristocracy and having livestock and laborers tend the grass. What I learned today was that before that, and I mentioned this briefly, but before that, lawns tended to be made out of things that were low maintenance plants. That was kind of mind-blowing to me, because that's kind of what you're looking at. You're looking at having a yard instead of a lawn, which is, a lot of people think a lawn means not a valley out in a forest. It means it is a residential area. But lawn and yard are two different things. Your yard is just the property around your house.
Right.
And having low maintenance plants doesn't prohibit you from like walking around in your yard, which I think is really neat.
Yeah. But for all that I love the idea of the meadow, there's a problem with it. And it's an entirely man-made problem. But what I'll say is that for the last several years, I have allowed my backyard to go to seed. It basically is just whatever is growing there, and I mow it very rarely. Generally, I mow my backyard once in the spring, near the beginning of spring, and then I mow it again once as we are going into fall. I just mowed it last week. But the problem with that, and I'm going to read this. This is from this is an ordinance from my municipality. No person, firm, or corporation owning or occupying any property within this municipality shall permit any grass, weeds, or any vegetation whatsoever, not edible or planted for some useful or ornamental purpose, to grow or remain upon such premises so as to exceed a height of 12 inches, or to throw off any unpleasant or noxious odor, or to conceal any filthy deposit, or to create or produce pollen. So what that says basically is that you can't have any plant life over 12 inches tall. You also can't have anything that's gross. Any plant life that's gross. What I really love about this is that no vegetation, edible or useful.
You're not zoned for produce.
I'm not zoned for produce. I'm essentially this ordinance states if you do anything other than try to have a lawn, then you're in violation.
Well, there you go. There's one useful thing for a lawn, is that it keeps you from getting thrown in jail.
Right.
I fortunately do not have those ordinances where I live, but I know.
I don't know if I do. I've never looked, but I will say that my lawn is a wild hodgepodge of many different kinds of grass that some of them are good. I mean, some of them are nice and easy to maintain, and some of them are really thick and hard to mow.
Yep.
And it depends on which side of the house you're mowing. So.
Yeah, I don't want to speak too much on this, but I have neighbors that have not tended their lawns, and we keep our lawn walkable, basically. But I've been actively looking into doing away with it at some point in the future. But I personally don't care that other people have mowed their lawns, and I've heard the complaint from someone about having, unmowed lawn that if you have really long grass, that's where snakes live. And then kids in the neighborhood might get bit by snakes. And I'm thinking, keep your kids out of the tall grass.
Keep your kids off of other people's lawns.
Right. Like if it's your lawn, that makes sense. But if it's your neighbor's lawn, then your kid shouldn't be in their yard.
Yeah. I mean, I'm perfectly happy if kids want to play in my front yard. I don't really mind that at all. When I was growing up, I played Frisbee along the entire street in everyone's lawn. If you're worried about somebody's lawn, then tell your kids not to go there.
Yeah.
It's not their house anyway.
It's not there.
I will say, I don't think I've really ever met anyone who takes their lawn super seriously. So.
Oh, Oh.
Well, I haven't. I know that I'm probably in the minority here.
You are, yeah. I don't. I mean, I disagree with them, but I have met people, yeah.
Yeah. I luckily don't have any neighbors. Now, I will say, actually, a couple of years ago, there was a time that I was doing some shows that I had some back-to-back-to-back productions, and I let my front lawn get a little leggy. It was more than 12 inches, depending on which type of grass growing in my front yard we're looking at. And I woke up one morning and somebody had mowed my lawn.
What?
And the thing is, having now this past year, I did have someone from a municipality come and tell me, you have 5 days to mow your lawn or we're going to fine you, which led me to look at this ordinance that I just read from. And there's actually another section of the ordinance that states that the municipality has the right to come in and mow my lawn if they decide that it's too long.
Well, there's another good thing about having a lawn is that you can make other people do the work for you.
Well, the problem there is that they could then fine me for it. Like, we mowed your lawn and it would have cost you
$40.
Well, it would have been $40 if you asked somebody from some neighborhood kid to do it. It's $1,000 if the municipality decides to fine me for it.
Oh, I'm entirely too spiteful to live in that neighborhood.
The nice thing is it's the municipality. It's not a homeowners association.
Okay.
Since I had the conversation once, they haven't come back and bothered me again about it. But I have been more diligent about keeping my front yard mowed. Yeah, it's nonsense. It's complete nonsense.
Yeah.
And it angers me.
I want to know, and I don't have it listed because it was submitted anonymously, but I want to know if the person who asked this question was hoping we'd say good things or bad things about lawns.
Oh, that's a great question, yeah. I was just thinking about my neighborhood and I was like, are there any laws or in the municipality, like things like that? And I'm going to guess no, because somebody behind me has like a bunch of bamboo along the street that's like taller than me. So how hard is it to maintain bamboo?
And this is the interesting thing, though, is that this ordinance, again, it says any vegetation whatsoever to exceed a height of 12 inches.
What about a tree?
That's the thing. This ordinance, the language, there's nothing in the ordinance that defines the term vegetation. So I am forced to assume that it is intended to be used in its common English usage. In which case, trees are not legal.
Right.
Yeah.
But clearly, the people who are enforcing this are looking at things and saying, oh, that's an azalea. I'm not going to be mad because your azalea is more than a foot tall. That's an ornamental maple. I'm not going to be mad because the tree is more than a foot tall. But then, okay, if I plant wildflowers, those, by the time most wildflowers, some wildflowers are ground cover, they'll be fine. But there are some that are going to be more than 12 inches tall.
Yeah.
But if I plant them purposefully, does that make it okay? I don't know.
Yeah, it sounds like a judgment call, which therefore makes it entirely subjective.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on your side on that argument.
Well, thank you.
As good as it does. I don't know. As much good as it does.
It sounds like you have a much stricter neighborhood laws than I do, which is good because I would love to do something with this front hill that The other thing I was looking at was like a creeping vine, but I feel like those are also maintenance. I don't know.
If you don't want them,
I don't want to do anything.
They take over a lot, I think.
Yeah.
That's no good.
So you have to trim them back.
Anything you call a vine, you're going to have to do maintenance to keep it from taking over more of the yard.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is that just regular grass is just kind of a nothing thing. Like if you want something cooler, do that, because grass is like the baseline bare minimum Cracker Jack box prize that you can have as a lawn. Get some bees flowers. Make the bees happy.
Make a pollinator lawn, for crying out loud.
Yeah, right? Yeah, it's been elevated to this level of the best thing or the staple thing when it really has no business being there. That's what I think.
If you're allergic to bees, however, maybe
be careful about that. But like, what I'll say is that, so I have a mullet lawn, right? I keep my front yard mowed and I let my backyard go. And the thing is, in the summer, I can, in the same evening, look at my front yard and there will be nothing going on there. And then I can look out over my back porch and I will see dozens of fireflies in the backyard.
Yeah.
Right? The other day, before I mowed my backyard, I saw 2 grasshoppers back there that were both larger than my thumb. Ooh. And that, some people may not like that, but I cannot tell you how happy it made me to see them. I have seen spider webs that were that put anything Charlotte ever did to shame. Just really spectacular. And it's frustrating to me that whether through municipalities like mine or just through social expectation, you're not supposed to have that. And I think that's nonsense.
I like my yard being like a Disney Princess Wonderland with all the animals.
Yeah.
So
you could get some fairies, put them in there.
I'd love it. They're welcome. No, fairies aren't welcome because I have a village of gnomes outside of my
you don't want
house.
Then you do need to mow your ground so that you can fend off the hordes, because fairies and gnomes, you will have massive
they've
battles.
erected a mystic ward around the property. It's a whole deal we have. I don't know where I'm going with this. So, listeners, let us know. Would fairy wings on a lawn work? Would you have to reduce the size of the lawn?
Probably plant a bunch of mushrooms, right?
Plant a bunch of mushrooms. Yeah, the fairy circle's there. Jim, do we have any listener mail?
We do. And as always, if you want to send us listener mail, you can email us at feedback@vaguelyscientific.com. You can comment on our blog. You can like us on Facebook. You can tweet @vaguelysci. This email comes to us from Rain and is in regards to the episode 88 bonus question that we put out a couple months ago. And the question was all about time travel tourism and where would you go in time to check things out. And Rain says, if I could go back in time to see something cool, I think I'd like to see the explosion of Krakatoa. I'd have to research how far away I could be to be safe first.
Yeah, because you don't want to get caught in that.
No.
Yeah, I remember hearing that it was like something bad happened like 100 miles away. So maybe not too close.
How quickly can my time machine take off again?
Yeah, there you go. You got to play chicken with Krakatoa.
Yeah, time out where the shockwave is going to be and like disappear a second before it gets to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it.
That'd be cool, though. I'd like that.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for that email. And if you have a question that needs to be answered in a vaguely scientific manner, please email us at questions@vaguelyscientific.com. If you want to get our episodes the minute that they're released, you can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and all the other great places that cool podcasts like to hang out. And subscribing and leaving feedback really helps us out, and so does telling your friends.
So tell all your friends.
Our vaguely musical intro was composed by Anthony Pizzelli. And don't forget to check out our merch store over at vaguelyscientific.threadless.com. It's getting cold in the northern hemisphere, so get a mug. In the southern hemisphere, it's warming up, so get a mug. That's it.
Get a mug.
Mugs are great. I love them.
Mugs are always useful.
You can make a hot toddy. You can fill it with water and just drink it.
Throw it at traffic from an overpass.
You could put toothpicks in an avocado pit and grow your own avocado tree.
Oh.
There you go.
You could make your yard just a bunch of mugs.
As long as it's under 12 inches, right?
Right.
Yeah, just line your yard with mugs and that'll be...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you. Do mugs count as vegetation? I don't know.
Probably not.
So thank you to Adam for coming back. It's been a while.
It has. Thank you for letting me rant about lawns.
I mean, you didn't say anything I disagreed with.
Yeah.
For Vaguely Scientific, I am Derek.
I'm Jim.
And I'm Adam.
And I sense a disturbance in the force. I must be off.
Toodaloo, I guess.
Adios.
What kind of disturbance are you sensing? That's alarming.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, you'll find out next time.
Fair enough.
And then I have our Why Are Lawns a Thing as our second question, and I will refrain from being entirely negative the whole time.
You'll be in good
I guess
company.
if you have to.
I'm going to have to hold back.
You're going to have to hold me back.
No, I'll let you go. The more negative you are, the better I look, you see.
Oh.